Hello there. And Dreamcast says hello as well. It's still thinking. Alright, so right off the bat, get this out of the way. You see a lot of the titles, a lot of videos swirling around, even some of my own, talking about the 25th anniversary of the Dreamcast. Really, it's almost 26 years old because it did launch in Japan first at the end of 1998. But the thing is, for a lot of people in North America and then the PAL territories, September and October of 1999 is when a lot of us got our first hands-on taste of the Dreamcast awesomeness. So it's one of those things where it's like, well, actually, technically, we're approaching the 26th anniversary of the system. But I think 9999 is such an iconic day, and it makes for such good marketing that it's like a core memory for a lot of gamers from that era. But I think also, more than that, like, the longer I stewed on it and thought about some remarks that I saw someone make that were correct. The Dreamcast started its life in Japan in 1988, but they were kind of acerbic about it and like anti-American. It's like, I get it, too many Americans think that their country is the center of the world and everything revolves around them. Everything else is of secondary importance, and I think that kind of attitude is wrong. America is just one part of a big old wheel that makes up planet Earth. It's just one part of many. But I think aside from it just being catchy, the 9999 thing is such a point of celebration, because for us fans of Sega, it represents like one of their last major successes when they were still in the console market. In fact, that period of history for celebrating is one of their biggest successes ever. Like, despite all the struggles, in fact, probably especially more so because of all the struggles we saw them go through, to see the success and the hype train for this little guy was really special. And he is a little guy, but it's stout. Like, this thing, it's a little brick. Now, unfortunately, because they were bleeding money in so many areas, there were some areas that Sega had to streamline costs. So there are certain components in this that are not quite as tanky as the Saturn, but it's still a very generally well-produced unit, beautifully designed. Like, just, it's like a testament to Japanese computer engineering and architecture, you know, all married together, and the clean and simple aesthetic, and nothing else looks quite like the Dreamcast. Beautiful. And of course the controller. There are a lot of people that like to hate on this. I love this controller. And you have to understand, in 1998, yes, the DualShock already existed, but most game devs had not caught on to using a second stick for camera control, or for anything. Like, even major blockbusters like Metal Gear Solid only used one stick for anything. It took games like Ape Escape to make a big deal about using two sticks, and even then it was like, whoa. Not a common thing at all. And Sega was no stranger to refreshing and updating their controllers. Like, they doubled the buttons on the Genesis controller halfway through the system's life. The Saturn started with a standard 8-button pad, but then we got the 3D controller with an analog stick and analog triggers. So I'm sure if the system had been allowed to stay on the market longer, we would have gotten a refresh with a second stick, and maybe going back to the Saturn style of having 6 buttons here and then having your analog triggers. And I'm sure the super cute VMU would have gotten an update, either with larger capacity or maybe like a better battery system, maybe something rechargeable would have been great. Like, anything better than this stupid little watch batteries that die almost instantly. Uh, it's a great little memory card. It just needed some refinement. But it's amazing to me that no one else really caught on to using the screen on the controller idea. It's like the closest sort of is the DS, was having like your main screen and then like a secondary screen with like supplemental stuff, but not 100% the same thing. But I love this controller. It's really comfortable. Like, really, if they had just used the Saturn's D-pad, throw another stick on there, for me, perfect. But love it. Absolutely love it. But yeah, I wanted to just tell a little bit also about my story with the Dreamcast, which I did during my Sega Dreamcast live stream. However, I know not everyone is into longer form videos, and I don't expect everyone to watch all of my videos, because for some people, the shorter videos are what they're here for. For some people, they like seeing my replays of my Twitch streams. And some just like to watch the gameplay footage with no commentary. So, like, you can't make a channel that appeals to everybody, but I am still trying to offer some different formats for different people that love this stuff, but maybe just have more specific angles they're coming from, as far as whether they like shorter or longer videos. So I'll repeat a few things just for the sake of those who didn't want to watch the live stream, and I don't blame anyone for not sitting through a 3-hour video if they don't have the time or just the interest in that sort of video. But I did play Dreamcasts up to and after launch. Mostly at my local electronics boutique, which was one of my very favorite gaming stores ever. Still hate you, GameStop, for destroying it, but it was awesome. I played Sonic Adventure, Soul Calibur, Crazy Taxi. Even me not being all that big of a sports fan, I still thought NFL 2K was just an awesome game. Like, I thought it had a nice blend of arcade pick up and play and great presentation, but still had the simulation stuff that the hardcore sports fans liked. So I just thought it was just a fantastic win for Sega. Yeah, honestly, I thought it made EA's efforts look bad, and still do. And it was tremendously fun. But you have to think that at the time, I wasn't even a teenager yet, so my only source of income was helping family members like my grandma with her garden and landscaping and mowing grass, because, you know, my grandpa never touched a mower, never did any of that stuff. So I would help my grandma and my aunt and some other family members with those kind of chores and make a little money here and there. But that was it. Like, usually I still had to rely on, like, well, on my birthday, I'll probably get a game or two. I might get something on Christmas. That's it. So I got to the point where I was able to buy a few little games here or there for myself, but a system was still a major undertaking. And the problem was, you know, I had the Genesis, still do, it's sitting right there to the left of you. I had the Sega CD. Didn't mind the investment in the Sega CD. I enjoyed it immensely. I didn't regret the money spent on it. But we got burned on the 32X. Now, if I had known more about it and what it was trying to do and what games I could have played on it that are only available on that piece of hardware, might not have felt as scorned by it. But, you know, my parents paid the launch price for it, and it just kind of blew up in our faces. I mean, I enjoyed Knuckles Chaotix and Star Wars Arcade, but it was like, we felt really burned, and like, then there's the Saturn, and like, it looked really appealing, honestly, even though I didn't understand where Sega of America was trying to go with it. You know, I played Knights, it looked pretty, but I was like, I don't really understand what the game wants me to do, and I'm like, I'm waiting for Sonic, where's Streets of Rage, where's Golden Axe, you know, where's Columns, where's all the games that I loved on Genesis? And, you know, where's the follow-up to Vector Man, Comic Zone, and all that stuff, and, you know, I was just ignorant. You know, I didn't really have a lot of video game journalism material to fall back on, and the internet was not very reliable in those days for getting a lot of information. So even though I always held an affection for Sega, like, I did follow along with like a lot of kids were doing and invested in PlayStation, and that's what got me into JRPGs for the first time. And unfortunately, I was ignorant to the RPGs that were on the Saturn that I could have been playing, but I got heavily invested in PlayStation with Metal Gear, Tomb Raider 2, Final Fantasy 7, Jet Moto, Twisted Metal, Crash Bandicoot, all that stuff pulled me in. And I'm glad I experienced those things, especially games like Metal Gear Solid that really broadened my horizons, like, as a gamer, but also as a person, like, understanding more about the world and politics and war and history and a lot more serious stuff out of the storytelling and narrative there. So definitely no regrets on that front. My only regret is just that I caved so easily to outside influence. Going along with what was popular was a way I thought I could avoid being bullied. Which didn't really work. It only worked to a point, I think, as far as social acceptance, especially when Tony Hawk's Pro Skater came out, and at the same time I picked up actual skateboarding, and I did find a little bit of acceptance in community through that, but it was still a very marginal win, looking back. But Dreamcast comes along, and unfortunately, still kind of feeling the burn from the 32X, and then still kind of having those big question marks from the Saturn days, where it's like, this all looks cool, but, like, where's all the stuff that I loved from the Genesis days? And I was still skeptical, but the bigger problem was money, and I had the money to get one 6th-gen system. And my grandma had made a wager with me, because she saw how hard I was working and saving my money, and then, she had gotten wind of me saving for a new system. And somehow it filtered back to her, like, the price of the PS2 and what it was going to offer. And so she made a wager with me that if I saved at least half the cost of a PS2 in a certain time frame in 2000, like 99 into 2000, she would match it by the time the system came out. And of course, little me at the time was like, gems appeared in my eyes, like, oh, of course, I'll save my money, I'll be good. I won't spend any money on games or toys in the meantime. And I did, and she made good on it, so I ended up having the money to buy a PS2, and, I was suckered into the notion, the novelty of being the first person in my household to have a DVD player, and it was cool. Obviously, in hindsight, you can see where there was only really a short window of time where the PS2 was the most affordable DVD player on the market, and really it wasn't the best thing in the world to use as a dedicated movie player. Turned out we had some build quality issues, some reliability issues with using the PS2 as, like, the all-in-one media platform. And I used it as my PS1. I just carried all my games forward. So, again, I don't regret that in the sense that the experiences I had helped shape me, I think, into a better person. I was exposed to stories, characters, and subject matter that I think were very important to me later as an adult. However, if I was able to go back in time, even knowing what happened to Sega and them bowing out of the console race prematurely, I would still have gone back and bought a Dreamcast. For one thing, of course, most of the games were less expensive than they are now, and that's, unfortunately, it's not something you can just ignore. I know there's ways around that, depending on how much you play fast and loose with legalities, and that is what it is. I'd rather you experience the games than not at all. But also, back in 1999, 2000, 2001, I would have been able to play a lot more of the games fresh without having anything unintentionally spoiled. Just having a raw experience of discovery with these games. And I'm still having a delightful time playing Dreamcast games now. that I missed out on for the first time. But, you know, it probably would have been more accessible and more magical to do it back then. But there's no point in wallowing in regret, and you know, better late than never. I do have a Dreamcast, and the indie homebrew scene for this is still alive and well, thriving. It's been a lot of fantastic independent releases for the Dreamcast, and some of the oversights in its design that made it easy to pirate the official games back in the day have, in a roundabout way, ended up keeping it alive longer, by really making it a lot easier for the indie scene to release games for it, even physically. But I also figured this would probably be the best time to go over my collection. I have really been dragging my feet about doing a collection video because sometimes, in my opinion, it too easily devolves into cringe, especially when we start talking about the prices that these original copies command online, and it's just a completely absurd topic. But then I've reflected on, I have watched other collection videos that were really wholesome. It's just about celebrating the games that mean something to you, and, you know, the stories attached to a particular title, or, you know, even just celebrating the artwork. And sometimes the extra bonus goodies that you get with a game. So I'll kind of rapid fire through my collection here, because we got a bit to go through. And another comment about prices, like, I don't give a toss about what any of these are worth. If the retro game market completely collapsed today, and all these games became worth $5 or less, I wouldn't care. In fact, I would celebrate it, because, one, it would make all of these way more accessible, again, like they used to be, for pretty much anyone who has any interest in playing these in their original form. And two, it would drive away pretty much all of the investors and prospectors that, in my opinion, are not welcome in this hobby whatsoever. They can go screw themselves with a cactus-based dildo. But I'll start alphabetically with the white label games. Air Force Delta by Konami, a pretty blatant ripoff of Ace Combat. It does have some touches here and there to differentiate it, but it's pretty part and parcel an Ace Combat clone. And there were two more of these games. Weirdly, it went from Dreamcast to original Xbox, and then the third game ended up on PS2. I'm guessing the second one was meant to be Dreamcast, and then it was easier to just dump it on the Xbox, but kind of weird. Yeah, it's fun if you like Ace Combat. It's just not very original, but it has some fun music. I've got Busted Move 4, which in Japan is properly known as Puzzle Bobble 4. But very cute puzzle game by Taito. This is on all sorts of platforms. Like, there's a really good version on the N64 as well, and then of course it's on all sorts of Taito compilations, so it's definitely nothing that you need a Dreamcast for, but this version is really cute, and it does have an edit puzzle feature. You can make your own puzzles, and it's got kind of like really cute, like semi-holographic artwork, so, and it's one of the last series of games that Acclaim published in the US. A good title. Very cute. Then we have Choo Choo Rocket, an absolutely insane puzzle game. It's deceptively hard too, but it makes for great multiplayer. Kind of a similar experience to Bomberman, so if you like Bomberman, you would probably like this, but it was one of the first console games to have online multiplayer, like not just person-to-person, like on the Saturn NetLink, but like multiple people online at the same time. Very, very, very fun game. Very adorable. But yeah, it's deceptive. If you play against a computer, it's harder than you would expect. But absolutely love it. Of course, how can you discuss the Dreamcast without talking about Crazy Taxi? Now, of course, the arcade original is probably like the rawest experience, but for me, this is the best version of Crazy Taxi. Like, the arcade translation is, in my opinion, as flawless as it needs to be, and it has some original stuff added in, like the Crazy Box. Can't say enough good things about this game. Absolutely adore it for all time. Dead or Alive 2, also available on a whole bunch of other systems, but at the time, this was like the smoothest and most gorgeous way to play the game, especially if you could play it with a good arcade stick, with a VGA connection. Just an incredible arcade translation. You can play it on other things now, probably a little bit more easily, but if you have a Dreamcast, it's an excellent 3D fighter. And there's no season passes or DLC required, unlike Dead or Alive 6. Then we have Draconis, Cult of the Worm. This was made by... Oh, shoot. I can't read that. I'm sorry. I think it's Treyarch. Company that has now been relegated to the Call of Duty mines. Yes, Treyarch. But before they were consigned to make Call of Duty games and DLC for the rest of their lives, they made cool games like this. It's an action RPG. It kind of feels like Morrowind in some ways, but more action-oriented. Yeah, this, as far as I know, it's not been ported to anything else since the Dreamcast release. You can play 2 different characters. One's more magic-focused, one's more melee-focused, but pretty cool action RPG. It would probably feel a little clunky to some of you now, but after a few minutes of adjustment, you'll get over it. At least you should, because it's a very fun game. I haven't finished it yet. It's just one of those things where RPGs, I have a harder time getting into them and getting invested than I used to when I was a kid, but eventually I will definitely be finishing that one off. Dynamite Cop. One of the most ridiculously over-the-top games in existence. In Japan, this was Dynamite Deca 2. And in the US, Dynamite Deca 1 was localized as Die Hard Arcade on the Saturn. Very loosely based on Die Hard. It barely resembles it. But it's a beat-em-up, kind of like Streets of Rage, but it's a bit more rigidly structured, like you can't freely explore the levels so much. It's kind of more of like a room-to-room basis, but there's hidden items to find, and unlockables, and you can use almost anything in the environment as a weapon, like hairspray, a rack of lamb. It's just absurd to the extreme, and I love every second of it. One of those things that's definitely worth experiencing on your Dreamcast. Bendable. In some territories, this is called Millennium Soldier Expendable, I believe. It's kind of a twin-stick shooter, except, of course, you only have one stick, but it's kind of like a 3D Contra. I wouldn't say it's as good, but pretty fun, and a bit underrated. The magazines of the time, like, one of my Game Informers talks about it, they give it like a 3.5 out of 10. I thought that was pretty mean. Like, it's not super groundbreaking or anything that is award-winning, but it's really fun, highly destructible environments, crazy weapons. It's not worth taking too seriously. It's just a fun, twin-stick-esque shooter. Flag to Flag. Well, the spine says Flag to Flag, but then sometimes, like, on certain menus and things, it calls itself, like, kart racing Flag to Flag, so I don't know. But it's like an F1 championship game. It's kind of like F1 Challenge. I weirdly just have a soft spot for F1 racers. Like, I don't really like NASCAR so much. But this is just one of those things that's fun to put in and play. Like, I think Sega just did these better than most other companies. Awesome Sega over-the-top arcade music in it really seals the deal for me. And I won't talk about prices too much, but this is one of those games that if you want an original copy, still very affordable. Hydro Thunder by Midway. You could also get this on PlayStation or N64, but this was the version at the time that was closest to the arcade. Now, if the 360 store was still up, I would say grab Hydro Thunder Hurricane on Xbox 360. It's kind of a sweeto sequel to this, but you can't do that anymore. But excellent game. The user interface is kind of bare bones. Felt like maybe it was rushed a little bit to make the Dreamcast launch, but the important part is the main gameplay is really solid, really, really fun. The only weird thing is you can only do 2 players. Like, this would have been great as a 4-player party game, but still awesome. This was a girlfriend pickup. It's kind of like a Mario Kart clone. It's like Disney's Magical Racing Tour. It's cute, it's fun. It was made by Crystal Dynamics, so I mean, it's of a good quality, and you can do up to 4 players. I'd say probably your mileage or kilometers would vary more so just depending on how much you love the license. Like, if you love these characters, and you love the Disney theme parks, you'd probably get a big kick out of this, especially with your kids. Otherwise, probably not a must-have, but it's a competent kart racer. And Power Stone. Now, I think finally Power Stone is getting a re-release of some type on a Capcom collection. I haven't looked too far into it, but I'm all for that. Like, as long as the game is true to the arcade, and or true to the Dreamcast version with all the bells and whistles that it included. But yeah, really fun 3D arena fighter. It's kind of like Smash Brothers if it was a little bit more open-ended with its combat arenas. I like this better than Smash. I don't really like Super Smash Brothers that much. I know somebody's gonna like try to crucify me for that, but this is how I feel. But this is good fun. The AI can kind of get cheap. Like, I remember the last time I beat the game, the final boss was like a total pain in the ass. Although not as bad as Street Fighter 4. So, but yeah, definitely, whether it's on Dreamcast or like MAME emulation of the original arcade version or the new collection coming out, totally worth checking out. Another Midway or classic. You could also get this on N64, but at the time, this was like a showpiece for the Dreamcast. It really looked special. Unfortunately, the early copies have some audio bugs. It doesn't break the game, it's just like during the title screen and certain other places, like the audio can kind of get like loop weirdly, and it's kind of disorienting. So if you see copies that say hot, fresh, same thing with Hydro Thunder and some other Midway games, they had to like reprint these in a hurry to fix some of those issues. Again, it's like Midway usually did a really good job with their home releases, but I think unfortunately the first batch of Dreamcast games was rushed out just a bit too fast. Sega Bass Fishing. Only Sega could get me interested in fishing. It's just a really fun conversion of the arcade game. If you don't have the fishing controller, its appeal is kind of limited. It probably should never have been sold without it. There were bundles in Japan where it's called Get Bass in Japan, and it did have the controller, but weirdly in the US, I don't think that was a bundle. So it's like, yeah. But really fun, over-the-top arcade fishing. I never thought I would make that sentence in my life. But if you have the controller for it, good fun. Sega Rally 2. Unfortunately, this suffered a bit from the arcade. If I remember correctly, this was based off a PC port of the arcade game, and then that was flipped over to Dreamcast, so it wasn't really optimized properly. The frame rate is inconsistent, and the gameplay I don't think feels quite as tight as the arcade or the Saturn Sega Rally 1. But still, really fun rally racing game, really great music, and there are tracks that were made just for the Dreamcast version. But definitely recommend it. And of course, there's Sonic Adventure. I mean, most Dreamcast collections are gonna have this. It's a staple, but for good reason. I wouldn't say it's my favorite Sonic game ever, but out of the 3D games, yeah, I like playing this the most. I just like going back and playing the trial mode. Like, the story mode, I like it enough, and I like it more now than I did 2 decades ago. But yeah, it's a fun experience. Definitely worth having in the collection. There was a limited edition of this that was only available through, I think, Hollywood Video. Probably not worth the asking price, but it did have some extra bonus features. Soul Calibur, one of the best 3D fighting games of all time, and still one of the best arcade-to-home 3D fighting ports ever made. Namco really went way above and beyond. And it's crazy because Namco was a rival of Sega's in the arcade, and they just went above and beyond with this one. They just completely blew away the arcade original and added in so many unlockables and extra features that it puts Soul Calibur 6 to shame. Like, it's stuff that now gets chopped up as season passes and DLC, but this was just such a complete experience. I still haven't unlocked everything in this version, even though I've played it to death. Highly, highly, highly recommend this. Even if you don't normally do 3D fighters, still a fantastic pickup for your Dreamcast. Space Channel 5, sick holographic cover. It's harder than it looks. It's a rhythm game, but unlike games like DDR or Rock Band, you don't really get an on-screen clue to tell you when to hit your buttons. You gotta match the rhythm, and so you really need to be on top of your game. You need to think like a drummer. If you know how to play to a metronome, you will be able to play this way easier than if not. Very cute, very retro, future fun, very 60s. There are other editions of this, so you know, kind of pick your poison, but if you have a Dreamcast, definitely worth picking up this version. Star Wars Pod Racer. It's probably most famous on the N64, and it is great on the N64, but this, at the time, was like the most heavily optimized version, and it even had some online features back in the day, like leaderboards and stuff. So it's not dramatically different, it just has higher resolution, runs smoother, so whichever way, and it's been re-released on modern systems. I played it on Xbox One, and it was like, you know, it looks good. It's well optimized, but I prefer playing it on this or N64. So. Tomb Raider: The Last Revelation. This and Tomb Raider Chronicles are the classic Tomb Raiders that I had the least experience with. Kind of made an ass of myself playing the demo of this in the last video I made from the Dreamcast generator. I just haven't spent enough time with it, but I do really appreciate the enhancements on Dreamcast on this. And I like seeing Lara on the VMU screen. It's such a little gimmick, but I love it. So it's definitely something I need to dedicate more time to, but I'd say if you want to play the original version of some of these games, especially this one in Chronicles, give the Dreamcast ones a whirl. Definitely worth it, in my opinion. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. Obviously, you can get this on PlayStation very cheaply and easily. That's the original version. It's great. I still have that version. It's on N64. I think this is the best of the original versions, like the original build of the game. I know there's been like fan-made Tony Hawk games that like combine the best of several, and there's been the Tony Hawk 1 and 2 re-release. It's probably more elaborate than a remaster. It's more of a remake, and it was fine, but it felt like it was good, but it's like missing some of that secret sauce. So I still prefer to fire this up along with the classic Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. So if you want to play original by Neversoft versions, I'd say check out the Dreamcast edition. Toy Commander. It's one of those games that, as far as I know, is still not been ported after its Dreamcast launch. It's a bit of an oddball. You play as like kids' toys. It kind of makes me think of Army Men, like the 3DO Army Men games, and beautiful Katamari in the sense that, like, especially those levels in Katamari where you start small and like you're in a room like this one, but you're so tiny that, you know, household objects look huge, you know. It's very imaginative. I haven't finished it. It's one of those games that it's like a mixture of a little bit of racing and like flight combat and kind of mixed genre action. I have to be in the mood for it, but very cute, very fun, imaginative, and it's one of those games that is worth checking out if you have a Dreamcast. Here's an oddball one by Acclaim, Trick Style. It's kind of a janky hoverboard racing slash trick event game, kind of like Street hoverboard racing on PlayStation. It's not the best game ever by any means. It's a little clunky, but it has certain charm, and it has a pretty cool soundtrack, in my opinion. If you like kind of like late 90s electronica. And it's one of those that is not very expensive. It's not in super high demand. And it does have like a full-blown VMU minigame as well, so if you like the VMU games, it's worth a pickup. And again, leave it to Sega to get me into tennis, because I normally do tennis games, but Virtua Tennis is awesome. Super playable. Just a great conversion from the arcade with some nice extras from the home version. I hear tell that Virtua Tennis 2, which is called Tennis 2K2 in the US, has more features and a bigger roster of players to choose from, so that's probably the better pickup. But if you just want a simple pick up and play tennis game that still looks and plays great, can't go wrong with that. And, you know, for Yux, I have the web browser. That's the white label games. Then get into the black label, which I assume Sega switched to try to get dude bros thinking, oh, this looks like a PlayStation game, so I should buy it. Like some kind of brand refresh. Like they started to minimize the Sega name, which is unfortunate, but this was a girlfriend pickup. Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare. It's not a Dreamcast exclusive, but I think for its time, this was probably one of the better ways to play it. Haven't gotten too far yet, but spooky season's coming up. It's very Resident Evil 2 and 3 style from what little I've played. So it looks very interesting. There's 2 characters you can play as. I assume it has a similar kind of progression to Resident Evil 2 from what I've seen with the different scenarios based on the characters, but I don't want to spoil too much for myself, so I haven't looked up too much info yet, but am very intrigued to get further into that. And this one, not many people talk about this one. And weirdly, I found out about it because I was researching all of the games that are compatible with the light gun on Dreamcast. And this is a racing game, but it has a mini game that's light gun compatible, and that's how I found out about it. But if you like Destruction Derby or Burnout, you'd probably like this one. It's kind of a, it's like Destruction Derby racing. You know, it's not combat racing in the sense you don't have weapons on your car, at least not during the main races, but you are encouraged to wreck the other racers, and it's really cool. Your car deforms in real time, and there's some other game types I haven't explored yet, but there's a lot you can unlock in this, so it's kind of an unsung little game here on the Dreamcast. Demolition Racer, no exit. And just to talk about price, like, I found it sealed for a steal, so it's one of those games I think just no one really talks about, so you can still find it cheap. And it was probably made at a time where it went straight to the clearance bins, and just not a lot of people even opened a lot of the copies, apparently. So, definitely worth checking that one out. Echo the Dolphin, his last official new title. This was also ported to the PS2, but I haven't finished this one, but it's what I have played. It's quite beautiful. I'm not sure if I would call it better than the 16-bit original games, but time will tell. So funny, because there's time travel involved in most of the Echo games. But Yeah, definitely a beautiful game, and it kind of feels right on a Sega system. So if you have a Dreamcast, definitely recommend checking it out. Great soundtrack. Quake 3 Arena. Now I know. What am I thinking, right? Like, just play it on PC. There's also a PS2 version, which probably takes better advantage of the controller. But this was made with the Dreamcast keyboard and mouse in mind. And it's passable on the controller, believe it or not. But yeah, you could play this on... I think you can actually still play this online. There's some Dreamcast games, as long as they weren't dependent on specific proprietary services, there's still like private servers you could play on. So this is a pretty good version. I think it runs better than a lot of the other console ports of its day. You just need to have the right equipment. If you have a keyboard and mouse for your Dreamcast, probably worth taking a look at that version. Sega Marine Fishing. It's even more over the top than Sega Bass Fishing. You're, instead of like lakes and stuff, you're like more so toward the open ocean and like finding bigger creatures. And the music is just ridiculously over the top, like bordering on power metal, and I love it. And there's an aquarium you can unlock like goodies and fish, and you can go explore, and actually has some really soothing mood music. So it's like an over-the-top arcade fishing game combined with this like really soothing and beautiful aquarium mode, and it's like, leave it to Sega. This also used to have some online features that were pretty cool. Of course, there's the legendary Shenmue. I haven't finished it yet. This is a more recent pickup for me. I didn't actually play this game hands-on, the full version, until this year. I know. It's just that even though this is the game that inspired a lot of what would come in your open world sandbox, it's those later open world sandbox games that burn me out on the style. So it's been a little harder for me to go back to this one, but it definitely has a charm to it, and I'm looking forward to exploring it more. It's just one of those things that, again, I have to be in the right mood for it and with the energy to invest. But there's no denying the artistry and the beauty of this game, and I'm very happy to have the opportunity to, at some point later this year, be playing this original version with its amazingly and awesomely bad voice acting. And I won't harp on this too much, but Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 got a great Dreamcast conversion. It's a shame we didn't get at least Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 on Dreamcast. It would have been awesome. And the N64 got a version of THPS 3, although that was probably based on the PlayStation 1, which was like a different take. It wasn't done by Neversoft directly, but still, great version to play. And in the same vein as Quake 3 Arena, I have Unreal Tournament. I think this one actually does better with the standard controller. Obviously, the keyboard and mouse is still the best way to play, but it has 4-player local multiplayer too, so the Dreamcast version still has some merits. I know, like, getting it up and running on PC is probably still your best option, but if you do want some old-school arena multiplayer action, like this, along with, of course, GoldenEye and Time Splitters, is probably, like, still up there. Well, and the original Halo, I guess, or Halo 2, but, like, up to, like, your top, like, local multiplayer shooters. Really good. And this was back when Epic Games made games, and not just Fortnite skins and licensing deals. And then lastly, here's Web Browser 2.0, which has the Sega Swirl game on it, which is actually a really cute and fun puzzle game that didn't get a standalone release. I guess no one figured that it was big enough to warrant getting its own disc, which is okay. But it's also a wild trip to fire this up and look at least part of the old net. Those were the days, I tell you. Yeah, I don't really want to do that again. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it for any of my other systems. I thought I would deep dive more into some of the memories with each individual game, but, like, I don't know. I guess if you all really want to see it, I will do it by popular demand. But I don't know. I think I'm just still put off by all the people that have done the videos bragging about how much their collection's worth, or treating these games like they're trophy pieces. You know, it's like no, like everything here is to be played, and even if it's not played very much, or obviously I have some that I like more than others, but I'll still kind of appreciate as much about it as I can, even if it's just the music, um, or the artwork. And some of these manuals are just like incredibly detailed and beautiful. So I try to extract as much value and appreciation as I can out of it, and value in the sense of how it enriches my life, and what can I learn from it, or what kind of trip can it take me on, and I don't care. I don't care about the monetary value. Again, the whole market could crash tomorrow and I wouldn't give a crap. So that's my take on it. But let me know if you do want to see me deep dive into other parts of the collection. But otherwise, that's the Dreamcast. That's my story with it. I wish I had my own when the system was still considered alive and on the market. But I'm doing my best to appreciate it now, and I'm looking forward to when the means are available for me to buy games again. Because, a lot of these I picked up on trade, or when I was working 2 jobs and killing myself at 60 hours a week is when I picked up a lot of this stuff. So things have slowed down a lot, but eventually I want to deep dive into more indie stuff. I want to get Xenocrisis on Dreamcast, because why shouldn't I? And a lot of the other just amazing homebrew releases or ports. We're getting Grand Theft Auto 3 on Dreamcast. Doom 64 has been successfully converted over. So a lot of exciting stuff. But that's my love of the Dreamcast. 25 years, as well as 26 years in the running. So thanks for watching, everyone, and thanks for indulging me on my Sega love. I hope you get an opportunity as well to explore Sega's incredible history with consoles, handhelds, their unbelievably rich arcade catalog that they constantly ignore, and it drives me crazy to think about. Yeah, let me know what you enjoyed the most, what your Sega stories are. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day and be excellent to each other.